To introduce our next panel, may we call on a stalwart who is a professor of chemistry and three-term dean of Science and Engineering at the Ateneo de Manila University. He was the first chair of the National Science Consortium on Accelerated Science and Technology, Human Resource Development Program, and has served as chair for the technical panel for nanotechnology with the Philippine Council of Advanced Science and Technology Research and Development of DOST. As a NASTI Vice President and academician, he linked PAASE with NASTI, which explains why many NASTI corresponding members are from PAASE. He is primarily responsible for the PAASE engagement in the ongoing debate on the socio-economic political issues around coconut oil. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to PAASE past President, Dr. Fabian Dairit.
Thank you, and good afternoon to everyone. I'm sure you all enjoyed the morning session. It was really very engaging and interesting. And we will continue this afternoon with 3 more talks, which will still cover these very important topics. We will have 3 talks. The first one is by Dr. Ernesto Terrado, who will talk about sustainable energy, renewable energy, and off-grid electrification. Dr. Terrado has a PhD in chemical engineering from the University of Virginia and was a Christopher Meminger Fellow. He is currently working as a resident key expert for rural electrification of the Access to Sustainable Energy Program, or ASEP, of the European Union and the Philippines Department of Energy. So let us all welcome Dr. Terrado.
Thank you, Toby. Good afternoon to all. My very short presentation will be on some technical, very practical technical and non-technical assistance we are providing now to the government, the area of off-grid electrification, right, which has been my field. Just as a brief personal background, I actually started as a nuclear engineer. I worked at the nuclear research reactor in the neighbor of UP here, and then later on when the Ministry of Energy was born, this tells you how old I am, I was asked to start the first renewable energy program in the Philippines. So this is why some people call me now the grandfather of renewable energy in the Philippines. It used to be father, but now it's grandfather. But anyway, that was the path I've had, and 5 years later, I joined the World Bank in Washington, D.C., and made my career there in the same field, renewable energy and off-grid electrification. But during the time I was at the World Bank, I always found time to do something in the Philippines that would advance the cost of renewable energy here. For example, the first wind farm in Ilocos Norte, I arranged the carbon financing that made that happen. And now we have a lot of wind farms here. I also prepared the first World Bank loan on a rural power project with the first solar home systems program. Now I am back. I live actually in Virginia. It's been my home for the last 35 years on a 3-year assignment for the European Union on how to increase access to basic electricity by households in remote areas and how to improve their incomes. Okay, just as a small primer here, when we're talking of off-grid areas, we're talking of those places outside the network that is normally serviced by the utilities. And of course, as you go further, the households become more dispersed, and it's becoming harder to connect them or to provide them access to electricity. And also, generally, they become poorer as you spread out the radius of this. Right now, the electrification program for off-grid areas is subsidized heavily by the government. And the problem is that it has become an unsustainable program. As of the end of 2017, we have like 2.4 million households that have no basic electricity services. And the policy of the government is to electrify these people, even with very simple lighting, because of social equity reasons, balanced regional development. This is actually the policy of almost all governments in the world. But as you know, you need subsidies for that, and this is why you have the so-called Missionary Electrification Development Plan. This, by the way, is the program of the government being implemented by the Department of Energy. I'm not going to go through all of them, but just look at grid electrification, regular connections. This is when you just extend the grid and connect people. So that's a large part of what's going on. So there are people like 1 kilometer away, they will get service, maybe in a couple of years. And then you have the off-grid people, they're not going to get service the usual way because they are not viable. And so the agency in charge of that is NPC SPAG. They are mandated by law that if there's no private sector interested, they should go in there, get subsidy from the government, and electrify the place. And that has been really very difficult. This is from the NEDA Philippine Development Plan. It specifically cites the reasons why we have difficulty providing access to basic electricity. One is the high. Almost every NPC SPAG installation is diesel. And diesel requires fuel, and they are costly, and they're very difficult to supply. So electric cooperatives also, they are not attracted by, these are very non-viable areas, like 3-5 kilometers away. So it's not in their normal routine. So that's always been a problem. And then, as I told you, the subsidy funds from the government are really fast drying up, and it's in trouble right now. And there are very few private sector participants because they tend to pick the low-hanging fruit, and that's it. So the program I'm doing now, which is for 3 years, has been helping develop strategies. Strategies in the form of technical innovations, changes in policies and regulations to attract the private sector, and new business models. For example, one of the things we have concentrated on is how to reduce diesel fuel usage in this country. And these are by 2 ways. We don't like diesel. They emit a lot of greenhouse gases, they pollute, but we have no choice. All over the world, we cannot get rid of them immediately, but we have to do something. Hybridization is one of the ways to start. You hybridize a diesel system with solar PV, for example. In an optimal way, it reduces the cost. At the same time, the part that you make into like solar is free from any fuel uncertainties in the future. So this is what you call hybridization with renewable energy. And then some very basic conventional efficiency measures like making sure the diesel engines are rated properly for the load really can go a long way towards reducing costs. So we have done this. We have done some very detailed expert studies on this. And we are urging the government and PCSPAC to start doing this as a program for their diesel installations. The other is the subsidy policy. Right now, we need about 17 billion pesos per year just to subsidize. And people already are resenting this because they are paying this through the universal charge that all of you gets charged in your monthly electricity bill, right? So the question really is not how to get more subsidy, but the question is how to rationalize it. Sometimes it's too high for a certain thing that should be low. Sometimes the wrong people get it. Just an example. It was found by our study that a lot of the subsidies go to reduce tariffs for like SM in Palawan, big commercial establishments that also benefit from the subsidy system. So this is what we call rationalizing MEDP subsidy, and we have done a very good study on that. The other is the so-called competitive selection process, the rules and regulations for private sector participation. For example, the complaints of private sector is that it takes years to get the approvals, the permits, etc., the tariffs, and so on. And not only that, if you have a project which is like 10 megawatts, so this is normally a big company with a lot of lawyers, you can do the paperwork, but the same process is required for a 50 kilowatt plant in a small island. So we are trying to correct this so that this is just one of the few things, and I think we are succeeding in terms of changing the policies of the government on this. And the other is trying to promote what we call small livelihood uses. This is easy to say, and I think you know what I mean. You have small things in off-grid areas, but they are not really easy to do. I have basically mentioned this, that we have done expert policy studies and hybridization studies. And also right now in Davao, we have installed and operating 2 solar-powered systems that demonstrate how people can improve their incomes in a very cost-effective way. For example, in one of the areas in Davao, we have installed a mechanized abaca spindler powered by 2 kilowatts of solar. And this is not just a demonstration. We did actual feasibility studies to show that the market prices of the abaca, because of the better product quality, is raised significantly, that it makes this very cost-effective. The second one is a corn dehulling machine. And if you look at the faces of people when they get this machine, they are really very thankful, because normally in a harvest, it takes them like 1 week to dehull by hand. Now it takes them hours, right? And so this is one of the things that could be done in addition to regular off-grid electrification. As you know already, in a lot of the remote areas where houses are dispersed, people are poor. The solution is often solar home systems, just to provide basic lighting. The difference between a kerosene lamp, the light of a kerosene lamp, and the light from a solar PV system is really fantastic. It enables children to study at night and all of that. So this is what's happening all over the world. We here in the Philippines, we are trying to adapt a lot of this. So one of the things that our project is doing now is actually with easy funding, installing thousands of solar home systems in Mindanao. About 3,000 has been installed now, and so on. And then we are doing some socioeconomic impact evaluation of how people actually are benefited by this. So how have we done so far, right? You cannot say that all of the things we recommend to the government are accepted, right? It's not as easy as that, but I am pleased to say that many of the big policy recommendations we have recommended are now making it into the draft circulars, like this omnibus guidelines for MEDP that is now being put to the public in public consultation meetings. And then we also had provided input to the so-called renewable portfolio standard that would increase the share of renewable energy mandated by law for all distribution in rural areas. And we have done a lot of training of energy staff in the use of basic least cost economic planning tools for this purpose. I have been asked to end with some implications for R&D. As you can see from my presentation, it's a bit different from the very nice academic potentials that have been pointed out, which is really very good. In the field of electrification, especially off-grid, everything has to be practical because it's costly, right? If you want to electrify 500,000 people, you cannot experiment with some new technologies. You have to you have to use whatever is off the shelf, whatever is the most economic, and that is really what limits implications for R&D. So, well, what is the role of research? For example, in renewable energy applications for off-grid areas, we can do a lot of local adaptation of new technologies that are coming in. Solar PV, it's very hard to compete with China and all of the big, largely funded national laboratories in terms of basic research. But we can test what they have coming on the market and make sure that we are up to the latest available. For example, storage batteries has always been important. Right now, lithium-ion batteries are the norm. Why? Because they're cost-effective, but also because they have a long track record. So newcomers are coming in, like Zinc Air, touted to be the next less costly battery, but doesn't have a track record. So this is what researchers can do. Get a track record for this so that in the next big program of the government, this can be used. Also, research on comparing, updating business models, like how is it being done in China? How is it being done in India? Are they deploying energies at a lower cost per household than what are they doing? What is the profitability? What is the cost recovery deal? So any studies that updates the information to the government on that will always be needed. And finally, we need to evaluate the social impact, not only of renewables, but whatever you put there. If you put diesel, what are really the social impacts of having social diesel with renewables? We are doing that right now in about 2,000 households in Davao by a UP professor, social impact of solar home systems. The first to be done in this country because a lot of the social impact studies here have been on grid-connected, the impact of grid connection. But nobody has studied the impact on solar home systems. So this is just to illustrate to you the very practical aspects of the field I'm in. We're not talking of new technologies or new things. For example, somebody asked me at lunchtime, what do you think, sir, of ocean thermal energy and tidal energy as a source of energy? I appreciate the question because obviously for a country like that, you have these things which are very big resources. But the answer is very simple. In the scale of things that will happen or will be adapted, they are still a little bit way off. So research, some academic studies, finding out what is the role of these things will be important. But basically, you cannot get any money for big research now on, say, tidal energy. So with this, I close my talk just to basically say, I have done this in almost 20, 30 countries, just trying to find ways by which you can electrify households in remote areas in a very cost-effective way that can be sustained. In the Philippines, it's still a challenge, and that is where we're trying to help. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Terrado. If I suppose, of course, you noticed that this morning's session was very heavy on the experimental. This afternoon, we have a different range of talks. Dr. Terrado's talk was really on, well, just on energy, but a lot on energy policy. And he's an excellent example of a person who can mentor you if that's an area of interest. And it's very important, energy is the basis for everything that we do. So thank you for Dr. Terrado for sharing your experience. And I'm sure for being open to mentoring future researchers who want to get into energy policy or other related fields.